Radio Bypass, bringing you rock and roll music that deserves to be heard. Discover new bands. Here's some old favorites on Radio Bypass.
Hey rockers, joining us by phone today is a guitarist I'm sure you know. From Testament, Metal Allegiance, and the Alex Skolnick Trio, we have Mr. Alex Skolnick. How you doing, Alex?
I'm great. How about yourself?
Doing good, man. Thanks for coming by Radio Bypass today to share a little time with us and talk about an exciting show that you've got coming up next month in Anaheim, California.
Yes, absolutely. We are excited.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I guess we should just start with that because that is kind of the big deal right now. So Metal Allegiance has released, in case you guys don't know about Metal Allegiance, has released 2 albums so far, if I remember correctly, 20 as far as original material. 2015, correct. 2018, I believe, were the release years for those records. And it's kind of a mixture of a lot of people that were big in the heavy metal scene, but then there's also a core grouping of you guys that make up Metal Allegiance. And you've been doing it for about 10 years now. I think it's about your 10-year anniversary.
That's correct. Yes.
Or will be. So tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about Metal Allegiance. How it came together, the core members, and how you bring in the additional folks.
Yeah. Well, it all started with a show called Metal Masters, which was a little bit more of a music clinic workshop that was put on by Mark Mingy, our bass player, founder, when he used to work in the music product world. And he would get musician friends together, well-known musicians, and do a little bit of a combination concert and Q&A. And it would help promote the products. This program was called Metal Masters. Now, I never got to participate in Metal Masters before it became Metal Allegiance, but I was part of the very first show where it was called Metal Allegiance. And in this case, it was just a concert. So this took place on Motorboat, which was the only voyage of the Motorhead music cruise.
Okay.
And it was an all-star jam session, filling in for Megadeth, who had to cancel at the last minute. So this became a concert. Members of Megadeth, members of my band, Testament, Anthrax, everybody who was on the ship that day.
Right.
But meanwhile, there had been discussions about trying to get an album together and doing original music and sort of capturing the all-star show on an album of original material.
Now this beginning when you guys filled in last minute on that cruise, I assume at that point you guys were just pulling together a bunch of covers.
At that point, it was covers. Yes,
gotcha.
It was Rush, Van Halen, Black Sabbath, everybody's favorite tunes.
Got it.
And it's our 10-year anniversary because it's 10 years since that night. Basically, that took place in 2014.
Got it.
The album came out the next year in 2015, but no sooner had we done that first show, and I was sort of brought in last minute as a special guest, where we kind of hit it off, and it made sense to have a writing team where nobody's in the same bands, so you don't have the conflict of it being part of an existing band,
right?
And it was my first time, but Mike Portnoy and Mark May and David Ellison had been having conversations about getting original material together for a record, and I guess we hit it off so well at that jam session on the boat that my phone was ringing within 24 hours of disembarking on the ship.
Right.
And this, I believe this was late summer when that cruise took place. And by winter, around now, actually, around the time of the holidays, the four of us were, we hold ourselves away for several days in the rehearsal studio and just started banging out the music that would become the music for the first Metal Allegiance album. And it was a new experience for me. I think for everybody, because we didn't have to write for a specific sound. We didn't have to think about our existing bands.
Right.
The music was free to go anywhere. So we could take a little bit of maybe early Iron Maiden, or maybe take something more modern that sounds a little more like Mastodon, or go back even further and get the vibe of like early Black Sabbath, or even have some acoustic sections, whatever we wanted to do. There were no limits.
Right.
And we created a lot of music. And in the end, it just seemed to make sense to have different singers on every song. I mean, we were very grateful to the record label Nuclear Blast for allowing us to do this. We ended up, between the various singers and guest guitarists and bass players, there were over 24 people on this record.
Amazing.
So that's the first Metal Allegiance album. Yeah.
That's amazing. It's a lot of players. And I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that was the case for the follow-up as well, wasn't it?
Well, we scaled it down a little bit on the follow-up. We didn't go quite as crazy.
Gotcha.
I don't think we were over 20 on that one. I think we were in the teens. It was still a lot of moving parts, but it was a little more manageable and a little easier having done a record the first time around.
Sure.
And also we knew that it's probably impossible to ever do a show with everybody that's on either one of these recordings. But we figured, okay, we can create concerts with just a few singers. Sometimes even just one or two that can sing some of the other singers' songs.
Right.
We have a few singers that were really good at that. Mark Osagueda of Death Angel comes to mind. Lately, John Bush has been somebody that's been covering a lot of ground with singers. But most of the singers have sung somebody else's song at some point. And it's just become a thing where we try to get at least the four of us together when we can. But the show works even without the core four guys. But either way, we always have enough of a lineup to make it big and exciting, especially when we play the Anaheim House of Blues. Those are our biggest shows. Nothing competes with that. We do other shows. We did a show in New Jersey a few months ago that went very well. But I think for that we had I guess close to 10 people. This is going to be more than double that.
Right. Yeah.
And that's possible because it's the week of the NAMM music convention. So you have so many players in town. It's easy to pull together a group of people that becomes a very large ensemble and indeed an extravaganza.
Yes. And everybody that's listening to this, if you can make it to this, it's on January 23rd, Thursday night at House of Blues. And it'll be the core four that we are talking about now: David Ellefson, Mark, Alex, and Mike Portnoy. And then playing that night will be from Alex's band Testament, Chuck Billy, Bobby Blitz, John Bush, Doc Coyle, Brandon Ellis, Marty Friedman, Gary Holt, Jeff Loomis, Mark Tornillo, and the list kind of goes on and on. So it's going to be a big jam there that night. When you do this, when you pull together this many people and do this annual event there, it's a mixture of some of the stuff from the Metal Allegiance records and some covers, right?
Yes, we split it up. It's about 50-50 original material and covers, and the covers are classic. Everybody knows them, but the originals have held their own quite well. It's impressive how well they go over, if I may say, especially considering the timelessness of the songs that they are compared to and played, within the same program.
Right. Well, for Metal Allegiance, I got to tell you, one of the songs that I feel is just up there with anything from any of your guys' backgrounds, in my opinion, is Terminal Illusion. I think that's a smoking song from the second record.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, we don't do that one that often, partly because it's a very distinct voice.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mark Tornillo from Accept. And there's just not that many folks who can pull it off like that. At this show, we will have the man himself, Mr. Tornillo. So we are planning to play it.
Oh, good. That's exciting. So now that you've been doing this for 10 years and stuff, and it's been obviously several since that Power Drunk Majesty Volume 2 record, any talk of you guys doing another one?
Yes. We've been talking about it for some time. It's always easier said than done, given everybody's schedules.
Right.
But we're continuing to talk about it, and I'm pretty sure that this is the year we will get started on it. So I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to compare to the past albums. Or maybe we'll get our feet wet with an EP or single. Who knows? But either way, we're gonna get started and see how it goes. Probably later this year.
Nice. Well, actually, 2025, obviously.
Sorry, yeah, this coming year.
Right. I know it's almost here, but just to be clear, 2025. Well, that's awesome. I'm excited, and and these shows, from what I hear, are legendary. I've not attended one, but I will be at this one, January 23rd. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be great. And all of you guys are just always so busy. I'm surprised, even though it is NAMM, I'm surprised your guys' schedules all align that allow you to do this every year.
Yeah, absolutely. We're, it's really grown. It became, it's a given, pretty much that, if the NAMM convention is happening, we're going to be there. And Thursday night, it's become our night. It's become a tradition, and it's become very popular with the attendees. The press has been very welcoming. There's a lot of welcome guides for NAMM and recommendations of concerts, and we've been blessed with some really great recommendations and reviews of the show by some high-profile guides and publications. So it's considered a highlight of NAMM, which is just something. It's a lot to be proud of, because it's something we helped, we created.
Right, exactly. And we know that sometimes metal in our country anyway the popularity of it seems to kind of go up and down. At least over my lifetime, has seemed that way. Seems to always be a little stronger in Europe, like consistently. I mean. Where here it kind of comes and goes, but I think there's always that core faction of us that never have turned our back on that music.
Right.
But it's great to hear that people, turn out for it as well, because sometimes I question that, and I'm glad to see that certain metal shows thrive, and this being one of those.
Yeah, and also, it's got a very good reputation. We put a lot of work into it. We start the planning process quite early. Some of the NAMM shows, with all due respect, they don't always run smoothly because there are so many moving parts.
Sure.
And you're dealing with musicians. Admittedly, we tend to be a fickle bunch, and you get you have a lot of shows where there are it's an all-star group of musicians, but it's often folks that have never played together before, and it can get a little chaotic. Whereas with Metal Allegiance, we've done this before. We've gotten it pretty much down to a science. It runs smoothly. We control the moving parts. There's always new folks. There's always new players that are welcomed in that haven't been with us before. We have quite a few this time, but there's enough of us who have done it that know the drill, and we're able to make it run smoothly. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to that. So this show, obviously, keeping the metal alive for sure. And then you yourself, sir, since I first became aware of you back in 1987, I think is when I heard you play for the first time my own self.
That would make sense.
Through today. You certainly have had, I feel like, an interesting journey that surprised me a little bit. Testament being one of the core four, big thrash bands, and as we all know, thrash really hit its stride, I'd say, by the mid '80s, even though it was going on earlier than that, and most of you guys were together earlier than that, but really hit its stride by then. And thrash was so, and is so distinctive. It's so millions of notes. It's fast. It's heavy. It's hard. And a lot of guitar players, that are those shredding type of guitar players, typically kind of stay in that realm. You have stayed in that realm, but also I was very intrigued when I first heard about the Alex Skolnick trio being a jazz thing, and I've checked some of that music out over the years, and then I think this was an Alex Skolnick album, or maybe no, I think this was a trio album. The Last Day in Paradise album, that was a trio album. Is that right?
Yes. That would have been very early ones. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that was had to be the mid 2000s, maybe 07 or something.
Yeah, hard to believe. Yeah, mid to late 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah, and so so that song, I saw the title, so I had to listen to this first when I got the music, which was Western Sabbath Stomp, which I thought was really cool. But that caused me to check out some more of your different iterations of music, and then I had read up on you, and that's a for most people that would be a pretty drastic change from the kind of shredding and riffing you're doing in a band like Testament to doing Alan Holdsworth and that style of playing. What interested you in that? Was that something that, because I know you were only 16 or something when you first signed up or joined up with Testament.
That's right.
If you were like me, when I was 16, I didn't necessarily appreciate certain things like an Alan Holdsworth, for example. I certainly didn't appreciate jazz at that time of my life. If it wasn't Aerosmith, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, stuff like that, I had no interest. It wasn't until I got older that I started appreciating music, more about the musicality, right? And the playing and all that. But as a young person, just give me that. I want the screaming guitars, the loud voices, whatever it may be. Was that you, or had you always had an interest in jazz music?
I think there are a lot of us that go through that process. It happens at different times. I meet people at my instrumental shows that had no idea they would ever enjoy such a thing now. And I hear from them all the time. I hear it in emails and comments, and it's really wonderful. Thanking me for giving permission that it's okay to get into this music and have a different experience than going to a loud concert and where there's it's at full volume and standing room only, which is great. That's great in itself, but it's also nice to go to a concert, sit, listen to the music in depth, and
Right.
just pay close attention. And and then occasionally there are folks who get into that very early, who are just very wise and attuned at a young age. But yeah, for me, it was really it was my late teens where it started, and ironically, just as Testament was starting to emerge as a national and international group. I had always been a fan of a few artists that sort of get categorized in jazz, but aren't necessarily jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Al Di Meola, for example. Especially Al Di Meola's guitar trio was John McLaughlin and Paco de Lucia.
Right.
So I always liked Al. I was very selective. I liked Al Di Meola. I liked John McLaughlin. I liked Alan Holdsworth, except it was way over my head.
Me too. Until I got older. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I didn't really get where it was coming from, but I appreciated it. I just thought, okay, like playing that stuff or like understanding it's just not for me. I'll just kind of go to the concert. I'll be awed by it.
Right.
I'll appreciate it, but it was interesting. What really turned my head was the electric music of Miles Davis in the 1980s.
Mm-hmm.
And I caught a live performance on television that just completely knocked me out. And the guitar was screaming. Just the vocabulary that they were using was so advanced. It was it was really exciting to me, and I hadn't been excited about guitar in a few years, to be honest. Like I was very excited when I would have these moments, hearing Eruption for the first time.
Oh my God, yeah.
Hearing Randy Rhoads for the first time.
Yep.
But after a while, I don't know. It started to. There were so many imitators after that, and I liked. I was very appreciative of Joe Satriani, for example, and he had been my guitar teacher.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. How was that before you joined Testament? Were you taking lessons with Joe?
Yeah, before and during. It was right. I joined Testament during the time I was studying with Joe. So
gotcha.
A lot happened, but even then, I just thought a lot of music theory was over my head, and a lot of that really advanced music seemed over my head. And then, but it was this electric Miles Davis stuff that just caused me to get excited about music and learning again. And I got out my Joe Satriani notes that I hadn't looked at for a long time, and a lot of stuff. It was a bit hard for me to handle at the time, and just really started concentrating and focusing, and started taking lessons with some more jazz-oriented musicians, and and also just making these connections. Miles Davis had played in the 70s or late 60s with John McLaughlin. And so there was that connection.
Right.
There was also, he had also played with Chick Corea, who had started his own group, Return to Forever, which is where Al Di Meola got well known playing with him. And, just suddenly that music started really appealing to me. And I didn't want the fact that I was already on this path of, being this, kind of heavy metal guitar player. I didn't want to let that get in the way of, expanding.
Right.
So, in between tours with groups like, Slayer and Megadeth, I was going to hear Herbie Hancock and McCoy Tyner and Joe Zawinul and Michael Brecker, John Scofield. And, it's funny. I just developed this whole other side, and it was fascinating. And just as time went on, I got more and more serious about it, to the point where I had to just devote several years of just studying that music and really, getting my improvisational side to a professional level.
Right, right. Now, since you were getting into that during the Testament years, did anything that you were experiencing from going and seeing all these things, do you feel any of that crept into your songwriting?
Oh, I think so. Definitely. I could point to moments where, you can hear it around from around Practice What You Preach and onward. You can certainly hear some new influences happening. Like solos got cleaner, they got tighter, they got more melodically interesting. I was contributing riffs that had scales and patterns that I wouldn't have brought in before, because it was coming from this instrumental side. But, I also had to really focus on it for a number of years, just to be able to I felt like reach my full potential.
Right, right.
And it was once I was on this path of, playing jazz and improvised music, and, really feeling like, I was finding a voice in that. Well, then I was comfortable when, Testament reunited in the mid to late 2000s. And since then, I've been doing both. I've done, several more recordings with my trio, but also worked with many different artists as well. As varied as, Percy Jones, the bassist from Brand X, which is one of my favorite jazz rock bands, to Stu Hamm, who was the first non-metal musician I had ever played with.
Who also played with Joe Satriani, Stu did.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. So, it's definitely been a very interesting path that's quite unusual in the world of heavy metal guitar.
Yes. And at some point, maybe this was during a Testament hiatus, at some point you got a bachelor's degree in jazz or something too, right?
Yes, that was starting in the late 90s, and by the early 2000s, I had a degree, a university degree in music, studying at the New School in New York with a lot of jazz masters, and just being in this environment where the next generation of sort of cutting edge musicians was coming up, and there are players who are really well known in as innovators in jazz that were in that program with me that I got to know, which was really cool. It was really good to see that firsthand. I don't pretend to be an innovator because I was kind of late to it, but I knew I could at least reach a level that was professional and good quality. And I actually have some friends that are sort of innovators, and they're considered top ranked jazz players. And it's just great to be able to interact with musicians like that, even if I come from a very different place, which which I still incorporate. I still do. I can still be a heavy metal guitarist, but I can also be a jazz guitarist or an acoustic guitarist, and I'm not afraid of getting out of my lane, so to speak.
Right.
Whatever it is.
Right. Now, in the 80s, when Testament and all those bands were happening, that's when I was a DJ back in Chicago, and we used to play heavy metal music on our radio station, and Testament, of course, being one of those bands. And some of our audience, like when I'd meet them at shows and stuff, it was very, I don't know how to describe it. It was like there was a big separation between, if you were a thrash fan, if you were into Slayer and Testament and Megadeth and Metallica and all that, it seemed like our audience did not then want the Bon Jovis and the Cinderellas and all that. They kind of made fun of that music, right? At least, at least we heard a lot of things. You know, the term poser was a big word in Chicago rock at that time. Yeah. So I don't know if that was across the country or not. I only have that sampling of the Chicagoland area. But I you know, if you started getting into all this music at that time, when you're making a name for yourself as a shredder and a thrasher, did your bandmates feel weird about you branching out into this whole other realm, really?
Well, I don't think they knew what to make of it, because I'm sure it was definitely strange for them, because it was not music that they were aware of, really, or that they weren't aficionados of. Right. Yeah, they obviously knew what jazz was. They probably heard the name Miles Davis, but they didn't. It's not something they had an interest in. Yeah, it's different. It's not like I was, moonlighting with a group like Cinderella, for example, right, or Bullet Boys or something like that. But yeah, I think it was just very different. At the time, band members, they didn't really do different things. Everybody was kind of trying to be the same.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at with asking this question, because that's how I recall that time period.
Yeah. I think, I just felt myself becoming an individual very quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's interesting. If you look at the Beatles, and I'm certainly not comparing any of us to the Beatles, the greatest musicians, the greatest rock band of all time. Right. But it's just kind of interesting to compare them in 1966, where they still look relatively the same. Mm-hmm. And somebody who wasn't familiar with them would have a hard time telling them apart. And 1967, when they look completely different. Right. And each one has a very distinct identity. And I think, in a way, I kind of went through that process early. Like, I felt like I was becoming this all-around musician who read books, that just, didn't speak. I had a different vocabulary. I didn't speak the same way. And, it just happened really fast at a young age for me. I think, different people develop differently at different times. And it's certainly probably, it came across as strange within the band. But I think after all this time, it makes sense. Like, looking at the music that I've done, that I continue to do. Right. Now it's not so weird. And now there are, it's still the exception rather than the rule. But there are other musicians out there that do more than one thing, or at least play in more than one band.
Oh, for sure that, yes.
Yeah, that was shocking. And even though, like, take somebody like Dave Grohl, for example. He still sounds like him in every project he does, but there's Foo Fighters, them Crooked Vultures, for a while Queen of the Stone Age, a number of other projects. It's just gotten, and there's so many super groups, it's gotten much more acceptable to do more than one project.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Tool and A Perfect Circle. There's Slipknot and Stone Sour.
Which is a very interesting combination, those two, because they're very different bands, the two of those.
Yeah, exactly. So now it's, it's different. It's a lot more acceptable than it was in the late '80s and early '90s.
Right, right.
To branch out in whatever way you want. It's still very unusual to branch out from thrash metal to straight ahead jazz guitar and jazz rock, but I was determined. This is what I felt like doing, and okay, nobody's done this, but that doesn't mean I can't do it.
Right, and obviously successfully. So good for you.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Now, if somebody is wondering if this can be done, they can look at me and say, "Oh, yeah, you can do this." Alex Skolnick did it.
Right. Well, and that's what I've admired about you, and that over the years, as I become aware of new music you're making, I always check it out, and I'm like, man, this is to me, you're an interesting person because you have done so much that's so different, and especially because it came from thrash. Your initial rise to fame was through thrash, and I just remember how divided it seemed to be back then. And I'm like, man, good for you. Yeah,
Thank you.
You just march to your own beat, and that's good.
Yeah, well, at a certain point, I just realized I can't be anybody else other than who I am.
Right.
I can try to pretend and try to fit somebody else's idea of who I am. Many people do that, but I can't. And then I look at two of my biggest inspirations, not necessarily sonically, but just as far as being unique and being individuals, are John Zorn and Frank Zappa.
John Zorn. I don't think I'm familiar with that one.
Okay. If you're familiar with Mr. Bungle,
I am.
Okay, the very first Mr. Bungle record was produced by John Zorn.
Okay.
And it's almost more of a John Zorn record, to be honest.
Yeah.
It has more in common with John Zorn's music than some of the later projects. But he's also okay. So if you had to pick one label for him, it is saxophonist.
Interesting.
Yeah, but he's composed over 100 albums worth of material, and he's got projects with some of the most respected jazz musicians, but also he's done a lot of projects with Mike Patton. He's a huge Mike Patton fan, and he's even had Dave Lombardo on some projects. I haven't worked with him yet. I would love to work with him. I work with a lot of musicians who work with him. Some of his music is just extreme avant-garde, almost punk rock. Some of it is just elegant, very well-crafted music that fits, jazz or even classical. It's a very, very unique artist. If you look up John Zorn, you'll go down a rabbit hole of music.
Well, and that's going to happen now, thanks to you, because I wrote the name down so I can research him later. Because if you're digging it, I'm probably going to dig it too. So I've got to look into him.
It'll keep you busy for a long time. Some of his music, you might scratch your head and wonder who is listening to this.
How does this Skolnick guy like this guy? What's up?
But then there's other music which doesn't even sound like it's the same person, and you'll say, "Oh, I really like this. This is great music."
That's awesome. All right, John Zorn, I'm going to be checking you out, mister.
All right, have fun with that. And Frank Zappa, you've obviously
Zappa I know and have seen live.
And there's nobody like him, and I think he. I just interviewed Moon Zappa for my podcast. That's going to come out tomorrow, and just doing research on him, brushing up on him. I think he could not be anybody else.
Right.
That's somebody he could not be anybody else but Frank Zappa. It wasn't just that he put effort into being Frank Zappa. He couldn't. There was no other way for him to be, and it happened to be just very unique and this strange combination of composer, humorist, guitarist,
right?
And he wasn't like anybody else before. There's been nobody like him since. And, I've been very inspired by him as well.
Right.
And compared to somebody like that, okay, being a guy that plays in a thrash metal band that also loves George Benson and Wes Montgomery and can, can kind of play in that direction. That's not that strange.
Right. Yeah, certainly you would not think that when at the time when Testament was new, you certainly wouldn't picture anybody from that band listening to any of the things you just mentioned.
Exactly, right.
and I have to tell you, I have to compliment you because I was so excited when the New Order album came out. My number one favorite rock band, not counting the Beatles, because the Beatles are their own. They're their own thing. So they're always
really are
the
their
greatest.
own category. Yeah.
But like the hard rock music that I love, Aerosmith has always been my number one favorite band. And your guys' version of Nobody's Fault, which happens to be still to this day my number one favorite Aerosmith song, was killer on that record. I love that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, because I know like Trial by Fire was one of the ones the record company was pushing for us to play, and The Preacher, which we did play those. But on my show, while the album was in its initial run and new, I had to play Nobody's Fault basically every night.
Oh, very cool. Awesome.
Yeah, that was an awesome version. What was that? Were all of you guys Aerosmith fans? What made you choose that track?
Yeah, we were. Those guys. The rest of the band, they were a few years older than me. So I actually wasn't that familiar. I knew "Walk This Way" and a couple songs that I'd hear on the radio, but Aerosmith had largely been defunct while I was growing up.
Yeah,
and right around that time, they got their act together, and they did "Done with Mirrors," and suddenly they were back. And then, the rest of the guys in Testament, they had been Aerosmith fans, with the records, and I didn't know about those records before.
Gotcha.
So they turned me on to like Rocks and all the earlier stuff. And we would listen to them, and we all agreed that "Nobody's Fault" really seems like a metal song.
Oh, for sure.
A lot of Aerosmith you could compare to, it's sort of like hot rodded Rolling Stones,
right?
A little bit heavier, but nothing really sounded metal the way Sabbath sounded metal. Even King Crimson, I think, sounded metal, like on 21st Century Schizoid Man. Zeppelin had metal moments, but Aerosmith, that was their most metal, was that song.
For sure.
Yeah. So that's why that came about as a cover. Interesting.
All right, good to know. Yeah, I just had a comment on that because I've always loved that version that you guys did. So I figured since I'm talking to you, I got to let you know. Thank you for recording that version.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. Pleasure.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing some of your background. Just one other question I would ask you. I know you have it's probably still ongoing. You had your own line of signature guitars, ESP guitars.
Yes.
So is there different? I assume there has to be. Is there different ones that you're using when you're in a Metal Allegiance Testament realm versus when you're in your trio jazz realm? Do you have different guitars that you use for the different styles?
Absolutely. The guitars I use with the trio would not work for Testament or Metal Allegiance.
Right.
They are arch top, semi hollow body guitars. When I play with Testament, yeah, it's my signature ESP, and when I do Metal Allegiance, it's also the signature ESP.
Gotcha. So those are still in production today.
They are.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a new version coming out in 2025 that I'm very excited about.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, yeah, I figured that had to be the case, and I'm assuming your amplification that you're using is different too, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Between the
Well,
two
with the
styles.
trio, it's combo amps. When it's Testament and Metal Allegiance, it's similar. I use a lot more effects with Metal Allegiance because there are just many different types of songs.
Mm-hmm.
A song like "Dying Song," for example, with Phil and Selma sang on the original version. When we do that song, that's got a very 70s feel to it. And it's got wah. There's actually quite a few songs where I'll use wah pedal, which I never used much with Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a moment or two, but with Metal Allegiance, yeah, there's I don't go crazy with it, but yeah, I have a lot more moments with the wah, the phase, the flange, and other effects. But otherwise, the setup is pretty similar.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. And I was curious about the ESP guitars because I have not gotten current on that, if those were still in production. So I'm glad to hear you got a new model coming out in 25.
Yep. Correct.
All right. So we've got the Metal Allegiance show, January 23rd, Anaheim, House of Blues. 10-year anniversary going into the 11th. So you'll be starting your second Metal Allegiance decade when the show starts.
Correct.
Yeah, unbelievable how fast everything goes.
Yeah.
After that, what else is anything else that we should know about going on in Alex Skolnick world for 25?
Lots going on. Yeah. Well, a new trio album is going to come out. Hopefully by March. We have a European tour planned. Doing music for a film called Traction Park Massacre. It's created by Adam Dubin, who's videographer for Metallica, and he directed famous videos by the Beastie Boys and Danzig. But it's a great film he's created.
Awesome.
I'm excited and it's much more. It's kind of movie-like music, and it's my first time scoring. So I'm excited about that, and it's gonna be an exciting year.
Awesome. Well, that's great. All right, Alex. Well, before I let you go, one thing I always like to do with these chats, as I call these interviews, is I like to ask the guest to pick a song to play. Now, in this case, because we're getting together mainly because of this Metal Allegiance show in January. I have not played. I do every Saturday. I do a 1 hour music show that I kind of treat like a radio show, and I've not played from either album ever on that show.
Oh, wow.
Any of the tracks. So when I knew we were going to be getting together, I said, I'm just going to wait until we're together, and then I'm going to add these to the interview, and then start adding them into regular rotation too. So what I'd like to ask you is if you would pick one song from each of the two Metal Allegiance albums.
Okay. Let's see. How about I have to remember what's on each of those albums.
Well, you did mention Dying Song, maybe from the first record. Maybe that would be a track to go with. But I too can never remember all the song titles, so I have it in front of me. So from the first album, you got Gift of Pain.
Yeah. Let
Off.
Darkness Fall. That's a good one with Troy Sanders from. Yeah.
All right. Let me write this down real quick. So we're going to go with Let Darkness Fall from the first.
Mm-hmm.
And then Volume 2, what do you recommend?
Well, I wonder if you might consider two short songs from Volume 2, because
Sure.
they freely form one song. It's the title track, Power Drunk Majesty.
Part 1 and 2?
Part 1 and Part 2, yeah.
Sure.
You kind of need each part to to make it work.
And I got to tell you too, when this album, Power Drunk Majesty, and then Volume 2 was a little confusing to me because I'm like, did I miss a Power Drunk Majesty Volume 1? But I assume it's just because this was the second Metal Allegiance album. I didn't miss another Power Drunk Majesty, did I?
Right. No, it's Metal Allegiance Volume 2, Power Drunk Majesty.
Got it. Okay. That's what I figured, but since we're on that album right now, I figured I'd ask you. Okay.
So now you know.
Part 1 and 2. Okay. Sorry, I had to make myself a note here so I don't forget what we want to add in at the end of this. Okay. All right. Well, everybody, we've been talking to Alex Skolnick, quite the interesting musician, great guitarist. I'm sure for most of the audience of Radio Bypass, you probably first heard him with Testament, but as you heard, he's done a lot of things outside of Testament, and Testament still is an ongoing entity as well, as is Metal Allegiance. And if anybody's going to the NAMM show, or if you can make it out to Anaheim in January 23rd, 2025, House of Blues, Metal Allegiance, an all-star cast cranking out the jams in Anaheim. So, Alex, thank you so much for coming by.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
Excellent. All right, everybody, stick around now. We're going to crank up. Well, I guess we'll go in order. So we'll crank up "Let Darkness Fall," and then we'll get into Drunk Majesty Part 1, Power Drunk Majesty Part 1 and Part 2 right after. So if you're not familiar with Metal Allegiance yet, you will be now. Crank it up.
Yeah, crank it up. All right.
American dream is dead.